the most powerful piece of technology on the planet. This is the Phi-Ray system. This is a dual tube plasma energy system. And so what it's doing is it's running a bandwidth of all the most powerful frequency sets for the body. And it's also doing the dual tube system, meaning that you've got two centripetal forces coming from each side. And when they implode, it creates this energy field that has all the most beneficial frequency sets in it. This gets really deep though, because what happens is that energy field is a plasma energy field, which is your consciousness and your aura. Everything is plasma, and it becomes recursive. So through that centripetal formation, and from doing that, it becomes a recursive energy field that taps into the frequency of your DNA, and it becomes a mindful and intelligent energy field. So then you start getting into things with intention. Now you're starting to enhance lucid dreaming, you're starting to enhance clairvoyance, you're starting to enhance all the different spiritual gifts you have. Your frequency raises, you actually start becoming more aware and more conscious. People, you're thinking about them, 5 minutes later the phone rings. All those types of things, tapping into Akashic records, the collective consciousness. So from a bodily standpoint, extremely powerful. From a spiritual standpoint, a metaphysical standpoint, even additional benefits. These are the technologies inscribed in hieroglyphics. These are the plasma energy systems that were being used thousands of years ago that we've sort of rediscovered, which is in turn an advancement from the multi-wave oscillators, which is where we started the whole thing. They're picking up the notes of Nikola Tesla. They're advancing the technology. There was a gentleman in France named Antoine Prairie who picked up the notes from Tesla, Lakovsky, and said, let's start doing this with plasma energy. And so Prairie worked with the French government, had over 5,000 case studies working with plasma energy. And then the third generational scientists, Dan Winter and others, said, wow, if we actually separated the two systems, the two plasma systems, and we put somebody in what's called the 0 point. So what's happening from each station is that they're spiraling in, but where they collide is called the 0 point. And the person now is in the 0 point. The early plasma technology was single tube. That was Royal Raymond Rife. And that technology is very powerful, and we're going to get in and we can talk about that. But Rife in the 1920s built a microscope with over 6,000 working parts, 60,000 time magnification. And he was able to look at living cells under a microscope, and all he did was put the cell on the little petri dish, ran frequency sets through it until he found what frequency stimulated the cell and what frequency would dissipate and kill the cell. And then they put together the catalog. So the Rife catalog and the Rife frequency set is one of the most well-known. There's a lot more now, but they use the same process of doing that. And so they figured out that, in addition, now the Rife technology, the single tube plasma technology, I have a book that I'll show you, has 3,500 frequency codes. You tell me what it is that we're working on. I go in, it runs those frequency sets. It's very good for killing bad cells. So Lyme disease and viruses and parasites and Epstein-Barr and all these different things, the Rife technology is amazing. But the scientists now said, wow, if we took the tube and we made it male and female, and we ran signals from both sides where it imploded, you would be in what we call the 0 point, the sweet spot. So the dual tube plasma systems are actually ideal for rejuvenation. It actually performs something called negantropy, which is also pretty far out there, but what it is, it's time reversal. So when you get a system that's powerful enough to perform negantropy and you're doing time reversal, things can spin forward into chaos. When things revert back, they can only revert back into perfect order. And so this system is not only a mindful and intelligent energy field when it produces that, it's also performing negantropy, and it's running a massive bandwidth of frequency sets through the body. Every part of the body takes the frequency that it needs. Your cartilage is different than your bone, different than your blood, different than everything else. And so when you run that bandwidth of spectrums through your body, it separates and each part of the body gets what it needs. And then through the process of negantropy, it's reversing back and giving the cells the information, restoring them back to their perfect homeostasis. So this actually is red light technology. This is a full body red light candle. We can basically go up or go down. I can adjust it based on getting the person in, finding a thing that's comfortable for them. It has red light and far infrared light. Like I said, a lot of documented FDA information on this technology, but it's good for detoxification. It's good for circulation. Red light basically triples the production of ATP, which is the energy that your body runs on. So your cells there's mitochondria that produce this energy, and the red light stimulates the mitochondria to produce more ATP.
Oh.
So, and it's being used for weight loss. Like we were saying, it stimulates the follicles in the hair. It's being used for hair growth. This is a full body panel, so obviously the whole body's getting it. Grounding is probably one of the most powerful forms of natural wellness and healing that you've got. Grounding is really, what it really is actually just touching the earth. So when you're touching the earth, it's technically earthing, but a lot of people aren't physically touching the earth, and then what they're doing is they're touching fabric. This is basically grounding fabric. Now the fabric, if you can see here, this is all silver thread. And it's not a strand of silver, it's actually coiled silver. And the reason it's coiled silver is that you're gonna flex and bend and push into the fabric. So you don't want a strand, because if you start doing this, the strands will break. But basically what happens is that outside of every home is a copper grounding rod. And that grounding rod is out there. So if there's ever a surge in electrical energy, a lightning strike, it'll take that surge of electrical energy, it'll send it into that copper grounding rod, and the earth will neutralize it. But on the flip side of that, because that grounding rod is copper, it can also bring the earth energy into the outlet. So all we need is the outlet. These are plastic. And from the outlet, it brings it into the fabric, and from the fabric, it brings it into the body through the silver, which silver obviously is conductive. So when you're touching and laying on this fabric, it's non-different than laying on the ground. Now, the number one thing that earthing does is it brings electrons into the body. Electrons are essential for neutralizing free radicals. The number one killer of people in the world is inflammation. Inflammation is caused by a buildup of free radical cells. Free radical cells, by definition, are cells missing electrons. So when you're not touching the earth, your body's deficient of electrons. When your body's deficient of electrons, there's a buildup of free radicals. Free radicals then, being unstable, missing electrons, basically cause inflammation. It's silent inflammation. The first thing it does is it basically compromises your red blood cells. So your red blood cells start clumping and clotting. Once your red blood cells clump and clot, it puts additional pressure on the heart to move the blood. Within 2 hours of grounding, you can immediately bring the electrons in. They coat the red blood cell. It lowers the blood viscosity. But the first and also thing important that it's doing is it's neutralizing the free radicals. So people have ongoing issues with ongoing stiffness, soreness, arthritis, all these different things. All cardiovascular disease, according to Stephen Sinatra, cardiovascular surgeon with a Nobel Prize, all cardiovascular starts with inflammation. So by not touching the earth, by not having electrons, you're basically building up silent inflammation. And according to the World Health Organization, 8 out of 10 people drop over dead from some type of inflammation-related disease. So by getting the electrons in the body, by basically neutralizing free radicals, by reducing inflammation, by improving and increasing your blood quality, that's the kind of thing that you're getting from simply grounding or earthing. In addition to that, your brain waves run on the Schumann resonance. The Schumann resonance is the frequency of the earth. And so with all the electronics, with all the cell phones and all the technology that is being used these days, what it's doing, the Wi-Fi and everything else, what it's doing is it's basically, it's taking your brain waves out of that Schumann resonance. And so when you touch this when you sleep and you're on the Schumann resonance, you're getting up to 20% deeper REM sleep. You're getting a reduction up to 20% in depression and anxiety. And there's a whole host of benefits that go with rejuvenation, also through just by good sleep. And so, you know, the technology with the grounding and touching the earth, it seems very simplistic. You know, I'm not a hippie, but I'm not far from the hippie generation.
Yeah.
And anytime I hear earthing, the first thing I'm thinking is Woodstock and a big party and, you know, that whole thing. But there's actually a lot of science to it.